Well, good evening or good afternoon to whatever part of the world you are in. My name is Sharon Dower and I've developed this YouTube channel over the last sort of 8 or 9 months because I wanted to be able to help people learn basic floristry and flower arranging skills. Now, as a commercial florist, I obviously work with flowers every day, but if you're arranging for just pleasure in the house, then you can understand and follow some of the tips that I'm sharing with you. So I've decided that on a Friday we'd have a Friday flower talk, and instead of me creating an actual design, I'd answer some of the questions that I often get asked. Sometimes the questions are emailed to me at sharondower@hotmail.com, or sometimes they're asked in the comment box below when I create a floral design. So this week I'm going to start with the basic principles and elements of design and explain to you how they work and how we incorporate them and use the guidelines to create a wonderful design. Now, Pablo Picasso once said that if you learn the rules like a pro, you can break them like an artist. And I think that's a really good start for anybody that's considering learning how to arrange flowers. Learn the rules and then you can break them or play with them or interpret them however you want. Now, you might be asking at this point, well, what are the rules? And are they rules? Maybe that's a little bit of a strong word to use, but they're guidelines, they're building blocks, they're the elements that help you create a good flower arrangement. The guidelines will help you form a structure, almost paint a floral picture, and they're sort of visual qualities that we use, characteristics maybe of a flower arrangement, and I often refer to them as visual tools. And we're going to start with elements. So there are elements and principles of floral design, and it doesn't really matter what subject you learn, floral art, flower arranging, floristry, floral design, whatever it's called, these elements and principles of design are pretty much the same. I'm here in the UK, and as a commercial florist, I've trained slightly differently from flower arrangers, so we interpret the rules slightly differently. And if you're in different parts of the world, then your principles and elements of design might have a different name to them. So if you're in different parts of the world, the elements and principles of design might have slightly different names to them. Sometimes there are an extra one added in different parts of the world, but I'm going to talk about principles and elements of design that I've learned as a UK florist and a flower arranger. For me, I think the elements are what you need to learn first. When you learn the elements and you understand how they work and how they're used to create a floral design, then you will understand how you can apply the principles to those individual elements. So, what are the elements, I hear you asking? Well, the elements for me as a florist are colour, shape and form, space, which is categorised as negative and positive space, and then we have texture. Often you will find line referred to separately as a separate element of design. So 4 or 5 elements of design. As a florist, I often refer to the line within the shape and form. Doesn't matter what book you read, if you're looking at internet websites or, whatever source, whoever you're talking to, remember that different people interpret and teach these elements of design slightly different. So if I say something that's slightly different from somebody else, it doesn't mean that that person is wrong. So for me, line is categorised in with shape and form, and I'll explain that to you as we go along. Other people might discuss it as an individual element or on its own. And then the principles of floral design are balance, scale and proportion, harmony, contrast, dominance and rhythm and repetition. And you look for all those factors, so those principles within the elements. So if we take balance for argument's sake, you look for balance within your colour, you look for balance within your forms and your shape. And if we think of contrast, which is a principle of design, you look for contrasts within your forms and shapes, which is an element. So when you learn the elements first, for me, the principles link in quite nicely with the elements. And we're going to start with colour, and colour is a vast topic. For me, I could probably do a whole Friday flower talk on colour alone. So colour is seen differently by different people. It is interpreted in different parts of the world in different ways and has very symbolic and cultural meaning. Colour, of course, is extremely emotive, creates happiness, makes us aware of danger, tells us when to stop or when to go, and it represents mourning. It can be celebrated with births and anniversaries, different times of the year and seasons, religious festivals. It can be cultural, political, and also historic. But you need to be careful with colour, because what it means to us here in the UK can mean something completely different in a different part of the world. And if we consider red, for example, red here in the UK often signifies love or romance and affection. Obviously also refers to danger or stop. But in China, red represents happiness and good fortune, good luck and prosperity, and you'll often see red used for Chinese New Year because that will help symbolise good fortune for them for the forthcoming year. It is often worn at weddings, big occasions and various types of celebrations. But in South Africa, for example, red is associated with mourning, represents bloodshed and the violence that they saw through their independence. So researching and learning colour is very important. Of course, colour can be very depressive. It can be the colour of the NHS, jealousy and hope. We connect it with the armed forces, the Navy and the Army. And as I've said, it portrays golden anniversaries, silver wedding anniversaries. It can be seasonal, so we think quite often as bright colours in the spring, maybe more muted colours in the summer. And then of course we have red at Christmas, a very symbolic colour for the Christian faith. You can become angry when you see red. You can become sad when you feel you have the blues. And of course, green will symbolise jealousy and the green-eyed monster. As I explained, colour, and I'll just get a colour wheel that I've got here somewhere. Colour is a vast topic, and we're just going to have a little look at colour wheel. So this is one that I often use here at the studio when I'm teaching or when I'm discussing topics online. And this is a good British colour wheel, probably used in different parts of the world as well. But it is different to colour wheels that are sometimes used in different topics. I know my son is a lighting engineer and his colour wheel is slightly different to the one we used as florists and flower arrangers. And we have primary colours, which are the red, the blue and the yellow, and they are the brightest colours on the wheel and often seen in nurseries, schools, anywhere that we need a stimulating environment. And from those three basic primary colours, we form the secondary colours. So if we just use the red and the yellow as an example, by mixing these two colours together, we get orange. If we add more red, we have an orangey red. If we have more yellow, we have a yellowy orange or an orange yellow. And when I'm working, I quite often use colours that lay alongside one another on the colour wheel, but other florists might like contrasting colours that come opposite each other. And it is really very subjective and very personal to your own tastes. So the colour red is a hue, and that is it in its natural form. We then add white, grey or black to it to lighten or darken. If we add white, for example, to red, we get pink. If we add black, we get darker shades, burgundies and plum colours. The brighter colours like yellow have far more luminosity in them. So if you use yellows, they will stand out and be seen from a much longer distance. If you use these darker shades in maybe the back of a church, they will recess and disappear and almost look as if they don't exist at all. So on one side of the wheel we have receding colours. They are colours that disappear. On the opposite side we have advancing colours, and those are colours that come towards you and are seen far more clearly. Then we have warm colours and cool colours, and often the cooler shades, and that tends to be sort of the blues and the grey tones, are used in resting or calming situations. So you sometimes find them in bedrooms or hospital rooms where we need to calm the mind and rest. Then there is juxtaposition, which is the effect that one colour has on the one lying alongside it. We have colour that's affected by light, candlelight, fluorescent light or tungsten light tends to change the colours quite dramatically. We have colour harmonies, colours that work well together, colours that contrast one another. And really, it is a really large topic that we could cover over a very long period of time, and something that is quite fascinating. Now, the next one we're going to look at is shape and form. And again, sometimes it's referred to as just form, sometimes it's referred to as just shape, sometimes we have the two together. And this is where I tend to incorporate the element called line. I generally categorise it in with shape and form, and I'll explain to you in just a minute why. So shape is almost flat. It's two-dimensional and doesn't have a great deal of depth to it. And if I just show you on my side here, I have a lovely gerbera, gorgeous sort of peach colour gerbera. It's a round shape, so it's characterised as a round. Some people refer to that as a point, but in my demonstrations and my talks, I'll call it a round. And the round shape is very stagnant. It doesn't make your eye travel throughout the design. It is a flat, calming flower which rests your eye. And lots of flowers are round, so if you think about roses, carnations, a begonia leaf, an ivy leaf, they are all really good examples of rounds. And rounds generally tend to be your focal flower or your main flower. So there are three types of category. Just by my side here, I have an example of line. And today I'm using a bulrush to give you the example. And what line does is it often creates the outline of your design. It can be like this one, which is very rigid. It can be twisted, so you get a broken line and you get a lot more movement within your arrangement. The line can be horizontal or it can be vertical, can be diagonal, and it can be implied. So there might not be a direct line as you have with this bulrush, but you have a line that is created through movement. And that's often how we use the round shapes. We create visual lines within our design, which helps our eye move throughout the flower arrangement. So points or rounds, and then we have line. And line generally creates your outline. It gives you your height and your width and your direction to create your outline shape. It can be expressive or dynamic, can be rhythmic, and it makes your eye move up and down. So in this case, it would go quite strictly and quite severely up and down. If that was an ivy trail down on the front, that's still a good example of line, but it would be a much softer line and it would make your eye travel down through the front. Now, if you don't have anything that's a round or a line, then you would have what we call transitional material. And this is your transitional. So anything that would be a spray. Spray carnations, spray chrysanthemums, spray roses. it could be gypsophilia or solid aster, and this is a far more busier head. It's very much fussy. There isn't continuity for your eye to rest on or to move to the second place. Your eye doesn't quite know which flower to pick up, whereas if we compare it to the single gerbera, it's almost like a full stop, and when your eye sees it, it stops and it doesn't have anywhere else to go to. Whereas if you look at this spray chrysanthemum, we've got lots of movement and lots of activity, and it can be quite confusing and quite cluttered. Okay, so we'll have a little look again at the rose. Oh, sorry, not a rose, it's a gerbera. A good round shape holds your eye, it pulls you inward rather than sending your eye off in different directions. It creates movement when you repeat the shape of the gerbera or the rose. It's what we would refer to as a focal flower. It's bold, it's high impact. It's often the most dominant flower in the arrangement, and it creates visual movement. So you will hear me talk a lot about a focal line or a visual line in my arrangement, and this is what helps keep your attention in the design, whereas the line often creates the outline and leads you to the round shapes. And of course, you can use round shapes in different sizes. They can be larger and they can be smaller. And that's where it connects to rhythm, which is a principle of design, by linking the different sizes of the flower heads, makes your eye travel through the design. If we go back then to the transitional material, sometimes referred to as filler or a secondary flower, this helps connect everything together. If you try and arrange using too much of this very busy material, your design can become quite cluttered and quite confusing. So don't overfill with this type of flower. If you're learning flower arranging and you go to the supermarket or your local florist shop, try to use less of the filler flower and more of a single dominant flower. They have less impact, very busy, very fussy, and the idea is it's almost joining the dots together. It's how you use them to complete the design and bring the whole design together towards the end. So for me, the secondary flower or the transitional material is what goes into your design last. And if you think about gypsophilia as an example, often you will create a beautiful design, you'll have lots of movement, a clear outline shape, and then you stuff it full of gypsophilia or even solid aster, and it becomes very cluttered and very heavy, and you've lost the shape that you originally created. So always consider those filler materials to be used in minimal quantities. Okay, so if we go back to what I've pretty much discussed now is shape. So it's individual shape characterized as line, points or rounds and transitional material. Once you've created a design, then you have form, which is often three-dimensional. So form is created by giving your flower arrangement depth, and your eye can travel from front to back. And if I just show you this container here, so if we look at this container from the front, it's very flat, doesn't have a great deal of three-dimension to it, but just by turning it to the side, straight away gives us that three-dimensional look to it. And that's what we do in a flower arrangement. The flowers go from being flat with not a lot of dimension to it. Once we create depth and we put our flowers and our foliage in at different depths and different planes within an arrangement, it creates three-dimension and a far more pleasing design to look at. Now the next one we're going to discuss is texture, and the texture is the surface quality of an object. It can be physical and tangible. Textures can be rough and smooth, glossy or prickly. Some things are very velvety or fine and hairy, bumpy or thorny. You know, there are a whole host of different types of texture. And what you will find is too much texture within a design can be very overbearing, very confusing. Flat textures tend to have a very calming influence on an arrangement, and you'll see when I'm arranging in the different tutorials that often I will use a flat calming, maybe an ivy leaf at the focal point, because it will rest your eye and create, really strengthens the dominant section and the focal area. So when you're learning, avoid having any type of very busy material within your design. And then we come on to space. So space is often referred to as negative and positive. And if we go back to my chrysanthemum spray, if you think about this in an arrangement, your area within your design is filled with material. So that would be referred to as positive space. If we have a gap or a void in your arrangement, then that is referred to as negative space. And generally in traditional flower arranging, we have very little negative space. You don't have a great deal of voids within your floral design. So if you think a little bit about ikebana or form linear or flower arranging that's sometimes inspired by sculpture or art, there is more negative space within the design. So there are more voids, there are more gaps. And again, those gaps are almost like resting places. They're dramatic and create attention and emphasis and drama within the arrangement. So even though I'm saying that in traditional flower arranging we have very little negative space, we do need to have some space around each individual flower. So for argument's sake, if I placed my gerbera in amongst my chrysanthemums and I arranged in this manner, then I almost lose the individual characteristic of that gerbera flower. It's far better if it's placed a little bit on its own with some space around it. Let's just see if we can hold that in position. Give it some space so you appreciate each individual flower and each individual shape. So when we come to design an arrangement or put that floral design together, try and remember to use line to create your outline shape. Use your shapes to create visual movement through your arrangement. Fill in your design with your filler flowers without using too many so that your design doesn't become busy or too cluttered. Consider having contrasts in your texture, so you have maybe a fluffy texture alongside something smooth. Leave some space around your flowers so that they are always appreciated, and choose a colour harmony or a colour theme that is either pleasing to you or has some symbolic reference or religious inspiration. So I'm hoping that's helped you a little bit. This is our Friday flower chat. I've been sitting with a little cup of tea. Hopefully we'll have a far more attractive hairstyle soon. We won't have these lockdown curls to deal with. And again, if you've got any questions, please ask in the comment box below or send me an email to sharondower@hotmail.com. Put Friday flower chat in the subject box. Pop back and have a little look at the other videos we've produced, and hopefully now you know what the elements of design are and how they work. It might help the grey matter understand why I'm using them in floral design. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again very soon.